is February 2nd, 2019. I'll be talking about the stuff that we've accomplished on Eternal Swarm throughout 2018. It it's actually been a really productive year. I'm pretty impressed with the amount of stuff that we've accomplished. So that's quite encouraging. Anyways, I'm going to go through a list kind of in order, talking about the stuff that was added and stuff that wasn't added. We updated I call it a look at camera. Basically, when an NPC spawns, the camera will look at both the NPC and the player. Oops. So we're going to use this tree as an NPC, but we can see that the camera moves so that the player and the thing it's targeting is always on the screen. It's a little wonky. It definitely needs to be touched up, but it stopped the issue where an NPC could be coming from behind the player, or the NPC would walk behind the player, and it made just targeting really awkward. Maps can now save items on the map and their current state. So after we destroy a tree, the tree will be obviously destroyed. When the player goes back or leaves the map and then comes back, the tree needs to be in the same state it was in before. So if it was dead, we want it to stay dead until it regrows. So I added that functionality. We added some new programming objects to store the state of certain items on the map. Lighting was improved. I don't know if you can tell that. I've been playing with lighting a lot recently, so I think it looked a little bit better before, but that's a continuous work in progress. Added crafting to the game. This one was pretty big. One of the things that I've been toying with for a while was that the players would be able to craft items. They'll grind for resources, and then they'll be able to, for example, let's say that they cut down a bunch of trees, they get a bunch of wood, then they'll be able to craft items that they wouldn't actually use in the game. For example, chairs, tables, stuff like that. So you craft these items, you sell them on your store, and then you get gold. And then with your gold, you can buy better equipment for getting into more dangerous areas. So you can buy a more powerful crossbow or better armor. And with that better armor, you can get into areas that have even more rare resources, so you can craft better items so you can get more gold. So that's kind of what I'm trying to target. And a lot of early 2018 was building around that sort of idea. So early 2018 was just adding the support for crafting stuff. How's that going to be stored? One of the things that you can do is after you craft, I'm going to use the chair example again. After you craft 100 chairs, and let's say each chair sells for 1 gold piece, then you actually level up that crafting ability. You get really good at crafting chairs, therefore you now can create advanced chairs, and maybe they're worth 2 gold. And after you craft 1,000 of those chairs, and I'm just making these numbers up randomly, then you can create master chairs, and these are really high quality chairs, and maybe you sell each one for 3 gold. And so you're going to have a shop over here. Obviously this will be hopefully redone 3D wise or graphically. After what you're going to do is you're going to put all these chairs in your shop, and then they're going to sell over time, and you can actually advertise your shop to get more customers, and stuff like that. Okay, so moving forward, we added crafting into the game. Players can now craft arrows, so they'll be chopping down trees, and then they use the wood to actually craft some of the arrows that they want to throw to kill bad guys. We added a skybox into the game. We added stone resources into the game, which work similarly to the tree. The stones just have more health. You also have to melee attack them in order to get those resources. That's something we added into the game a little bit later. Yeah, so we created this crossbow widget. So before there were buttons on the bottom of the screen. Now we have this widget. If we drag upwards, it's going to do an uppercut. If we drag down, he's going to try shooting. If we drag to the right, it'll reload the magazine. If we drag to the left, you can switch your arrow. If you're in combat mode, you're going to have a little bit different functionality. So in order to get into combat mode currently, you have to select a target and notice the health bar or the map saving the state of the tree. Good to see that that actually works in a semi-live demo. Here's your uppercut. Here is your jab, and here is a power attack. Now this was added a little bit later in the year, and I'll get to that hopefully kind of shortly. Right now what's in the game is you put 1,000 chairs in the shop, and then every hour there's a probability that a chair gets sold. In the future, I would like to actually have the players be able to advertise and try to increase customer flow through the shop, but that is not in the game at the moment. Each shop keeps track of how much gold it sells, when it sells an item. Another thing that was kind of interesting to tackle was that the player the shops needed to sell stuff even when the phone was off and not running. What I'm trying to encourage is that we want the player to come back to the game and get gold. So I want to encourage the players to keep opening the app, right? So after the first quarter of 2018, I started playing with Reflection. I started modifying the water shaders so that the water looked a little bit better. I ended up sort of I don't want to say giving up on Reflection. I just sort of ran out of time and was spending too much time playing with the shaders, and it really wasn't adding that much. I don't want to say quality. It just wasn't adding content to the game. So I shelved the reflection stuff. The water does look better. So I reduced the geometry of the NPCs. One thing I was noticing is that the frame rate on my Galaxy S5 phone is much too low. Mid 2018, I started adding level of detail rendering. Basically, as the player is far away from an object, we don't need to draw the high texture and high poly version of that object, and I can demonstrate that right here. Okay, UI looks awful. Probably not going to change anytime soon. Okay, so here we have a very, very low render distance if we look at the trees. As we get closer, we switch it with a higher poly version. Same with the walls. And actually, yeah, so these short walls, we don't have a low poly version, therefore the game goes, I'm not going to draw anything. But if we look at this wall back here, we'll notice it switch to its high poly version. Now, the game doesn't look good, that's okay. I'll get to that when the game actually gets fun. I added a ranged attack for spiders, which we saw a little bit earlier. They stun you, which is kind of annoying, and it's not very apparent. So in this box down here, it lets the player know he's stunned, but it's not good. Hey, we've added leveling up to the game. So down here, this bar right here is your level progress. Once you level up, you get to upgrade your melee damage, your armor, or your health, movement speed. And these are all just attributes I think the player would want to upgrade. Very little thought was gone into the gameplay. I just wanted to make sure that when a level up happens, the player can increase something. And again, I'll dial in the funness once I have all the tools in the right place. So one of the things I'm doing as I'm building this game is just trying to keep an open mind for what is fun. And sometimes I'll come across something that is totally different or something I didn't really think of. And then I decide this would actually be really good for the game, and then it gets added to the game. So I'm trying to keep an open mind about stuff. So that's why I have these kind of loose ideas, and as I progress further, I'm going to dial it into, what's best for gameplay. Items now have weight, so every time you get an item that has a weight attribute, and that's another thing that you can actually upgrade. Just past the second quarter, so the third quarter, I started adding the infrastructure for pets. I actually had to refactor how a lot of stuff worked because the spider, your pet, which in this case was a spider, is going to use a lot of the same AI that our bad guy NPCs uses. And so the bad guy NPCs, all of their actions are, or all of their objectives are separated into different actions, like a walk action, melee attack action. They all have different objectives. I want to be able to use those same actions in the pets. So I sort of had to refactor how some of the AI worked, and that went actually pretty well. But later in the third quarter, I started adding more LOD models, so the low poly trees, the low poly buildings. This building right here was created by Uno Maestro, by the way. Forgive the awful texture, that was me. I applied a really bad texture to it in very hastily. This is Uno Maestro's as well. We're going to see some of Sui Henrik's stuff in a little bit. In the third quarter, that's where we added a lot of the melee attack system. So earlier we had melee attacks, but one of the things that I wanted to do was increase the skill cap for fighting. It still felt, it's something that this game has struggled with since pretty early on, was that you could just shoot kite, and you never really needed to invest in armor. I wanted a system where we could create combos. Now, when I say combo, depending what attack you did previously, your next attack could be more or less efficient. And it's just really, again, to make the game more fun. So the first combo is, if I swipe left, look at how slow this power attack is. But if I jab to the right and then swipe left, it's much faster. So if you just keep going jab, swipe left, jab, swipe left, the player is going to deal more damage than just doing his power attack the whole time. You'll also notice that there is a action queue. So if the player starts spamming a bunch of attacks and then wants to move, they can't until they're done with their attacks. I completely split up this map here, but this is the first map where everything is completely made up of low or high poly objects. It had to be tested. I wasn't sure if there'd be a performance hit because instead of having one major collision mesh for the map, now there's a whole bunch of small ones that determine if the player can or cannot walk where they are walking. Now, what's interesting about this is programmatically, it wouldn't be that hard to create a Minecraft-like game from what I have here. Since each of these pieces has its own collision mesh, there's nothing stopping me really from having the player destroy part of the ground in order to go to dig downwards. Now, due to project creep, I don't want to do that, but the programmer in me thinks that's a really, really fun idea. One of the things that I had to do, so if you haven't been on the stream before, I use Blender as my front-end editor. So this whole map right here is what tells the game engine where I want to draw certain things. All these little pieces that we see here are never actually brought into the game as a model. What actually happens is if I hide some of these pieces, we create these little triangles that tell the game engine, hey, I want something spawned here. I want the player to be able to interact here. But one of the things that I did is I created a script because what I used to have to do was actually place these triangles for all the models. It was very, very tedious. So I created a script which makes creating maps so much easier. I didn't think I would get that completed until 2019. So that's one thing that actually was quite a bit ahead of schedule. The next piece I had, you'll notice that the map is multi-tiered, or there are multiple levels on the game. This was actually quite a pain. Well, actually, the multiple levels were easy. One thing that I wanted to do was create a very sort of whimsical place. So what I wanted is kind of a whole map of moving parts, and depending on where the player was, they could get to certain spots, and sometimes they couldn't, and create kind of like a puzzle in the game. Now, they don't have to go through this if they don't want, but I think it's a really fun idea. And this didn't spawn. I wonder if oh, you know what? I took this model out for the 2018 build. Okay, I'm going to use a different object as an example. Whatever. I calculate my own collision meshes, and once we started animating the 3D models, I had to actually animate the collision mesh as well, and that was quite a pain. So we have different objects, some that move side to side, some that move up and down, and then some that rotate around like this one does. The player can, if I modify the code, it would take me like 5 minutes, can go up and walk on this platform. As you can see, the player is not rotating with this piece, so that's something that I need to actually do in 2019. All the other models that move side to side, up and down, the player will actually have friction sort of attached to them, and they will move with the piece. So this is the last piece that I need to adjust. It's just weird because it's rotating around a point, and I haven't taken the time to do, the calculations. I added a new attack for NPCs where they could tackle you. It would knock the player to the ground. Now this actually added an external momentum to the player, so the player would fall and then he would slide across the ground, which looked really, really cool. This broke the collision logic, so while the player was standing on a platform that would move, that used the same add external momentum function that the spider's tackle attack did, or the NPC's tackle attack did. And that broke the bridge that moves sideways or forward and backward. So that needs to be adjusted in 2019, and that's another reason why I pulled that model from the game. Plus, it didn't really go anywhere at the moment. So hopefully that'll be done shortly. It's always a bummer when you fix something and then you have to fix it again because you added something else to the game, but that happens all the time. It's been a surprisingly productive year. It didn't feel like we accomplished that much.